Okay, so here's a little graph of the extensions on MediaWiki.org by status. Hopefully you can see the bottom. It goes from 0 to 3,000, and the thing that obviously pops up right away is just how many archived extensions there are, about 2,700, which is pretty amazing because to archive an extension requires a fair amount of work for each extension. You need to establish at least some consensus that nobody wants this extension to stay. But on the other hand, this is 20 years worth of extensions. So there is that. But just to make this a little easier to see, let's remove the archived extensions from the graph. So it's still a ton of extensions. Even just among stable extensions, which is the highest grade for an extension, there's about 800 for people to choose from. Those, if people are setting up a new wiki, there's 800 extensions that pass all the tests for extension quality. And here's skins on MediaWiki.org by status. It's sort of a similar story, except a lot fewer archived skins. But I mean, it's almost 70 skins for people to choose from. So how can MediaWiki administrators know which of these hundreds of extensions and dozens of skins to install? Well, one option is this book, Working with MediaWiki. Seems like a good resource if you want.
The Bible.
Well, okay, yeah, I mean, you said it. Yeah, so there's other individual resources that you can go to that have their own opinions. But I feel like what's needed is a dedicated resource that will help people make that decision. So the sort of pie in the sky complete implementation is first. I have MediaWiki version something with a certain operating system, a certain version of that operating system, a certain web server in its version, a certain database system with its version, a certain PHP version, and finally you want the wiki to do some specific feature action. So what's the set of extensions and skins that you can install, and more specifically the version, the commit ID, and the required libraries for each that you can use for that purpose. But I feel like a minimum implementation would be something like if you have the current long-term support version of MediaWiki, which is right now 1.39, running on the recommended, all the recommended PHP, MySQL, Apache, and we'll say Debian or Ubuntu versions, then what's the set of recommended skins and extensions? So there's nothing dynamic about this. This is a static list that would exist for every long-term support version of MediaWiki. And then their specific recommended commit ID and required libraries. So there are some resources that can help with this. There's a template on MediaWiki.org called On MediaWiki, which denotes the ones that are used on one or more Wikimedia sites. There's a newer extension that was created 2 years ago called Used By, which hopefully some people have seen, which lets you know the same thing, but not for Wikimedia sites, but rather for specific other packages. In this case, there's 5 packages that are covered by the Used By template, and there have been some of the people here and some speakers representing some of these packages, although these are mostly European-based, except for Canasta. And then the following wiki farms, and again, there are people here representing some of these. So what was it? 5 packages and 8 wiki farms. So here you can see an example of both of these extensions on the bottom of the skin called Timeless. The first one is the on Wikimedia, template, which says, it's used on one or more Wikimedia projects. So that probably means that the skin is stable and works well enough to be used. And then the second one, the Used By template, will list all of the packages and wiki farms that make use of that, in this case, skin. And then going from there, there are categories automatically generated. So here's the category, the top of the category page for extensions included in wiki.gg, which is one of the wiki farms. So you can see all the, in this case, 67 extensions that it includes. So there's some interesting things we can draw from that. There's an extension called Code Mirror, written by a guy called Pavel Astakov. It allows for IDE style editing of wiki pages, which is really neat for pages that include Lua, JavaScript. It's used by 8 of the 13 packages in wiki farms plus Wikimedia. And I think it's actually, for that reason alone, the strongest current candidate for bundling within MediaWiki. So if anyone here is part of that decision-making process, let me put in my vote for the Code Mirror extension. And another example, the cookie warning extension written by Florian Schmidt and a few other people. It displays that site that I guess because of European regulations have become a lot more ubiquitous around the web, which is, there's always a pop-up warning saying this site uses cookies. Are you sure you want to, or please agree or something. It's used by, again, 8 of the 13 packages in wiki farms, and I think it's another strong contender for bundling or maybe even integrating into MediaWiki. And this is a case, maybe it's obvious that something like this would be useful, but I think this is the case where that used by template really points out extensions that otherwise might have gone unnoticed. No one would realize just how popular they are. I just went through, here's some more unexpectedly popular extensions. These are all, oh, are you laughing at the sad faces? Well, yeah, I put sad faces next to the ones that, per the previous talk might become unusable when the parsoid switch happens. I call these unexpected because none of them are bundled within MediaWiki, so they're just independently. A bunch of people have decided to integrate them and have decided they're useful. It's not an indication of quality per se. I personally happen to think Cargo is a better choice than Semantic MediaWiki, but the crowd has spoken on this one, I guess. But it's still interesting to see, I think. Finally, one more example. There's 3 different extensions called Dynamic Page List. Was there anything else I wanted to say? Is there anything else I want to say about this? No, okay, fine. 3 different extensions called Dynamic Page List. One is the first is the official Wikimedia one. It's used by Wikimedia, but nothing else. The second one is sometimes called DPL2. It's not used by anyone, and the third one is called DPL3, and it's got 6 used by calls. So if you're trying to figure out which of these 3 to use, this would be a simple heuristic to figure out that you should be using DPL3. I hope no one disagrees with that.
I would disagree.
You should use none of them. That's the correct answer. No, yeah. So it brings, I was able to get this by just running a little script, but should there actually be a public listing of these extensions? Like, should there be a category on MediaWiki.org called extensions used in 6 of the catalog MediaWiki packages and wiki farms, or 7 or 8 and so forth? It would be useful because it would let people see the popularity at a glance. On the other hand, it could lead to groupthink, where a certain extension's popularity leads to increasing popularity, and again, regardless of its actual quality. So so-called groupthink. So I don't know. It's an interesting idea. So what? I have no idea. What's funny? I want to talk about canasta. It's a special case among the, I'm sort of moving topics among all of the packages that exist and that are listed via the use by template, or that make use of the use by template. In my biased opinion, it's the best MediaWiki package to use. Is that what was funny? It is the best? Okay, fine. All right. It's a complete Docker-based solution. You'll be hearing more about it in Jeffrey's presentation tomorrow. I just want to get to how it's relevant to all of this stuff. It's fully open source, fine. Interestingly, I mean, I think it's the only one that uses a consensus-based methodology for determining which extensions and skins to include. So the entire community, or anyone in the world, can potentially weigh in on including it. So it's really meant for the community, as opposed to the opinion of the specific company or organization that is putting it together. So here's a little screenshot from the GitHub page for Canasta. Here just a bunch of issues on the GitHub page, each of which has to do with adding a specific extension. So different people propose them, and then there's a discussion that happens on the GitHub page. And of course, it's GitHub, so anyone can jump in. Okay, well, so if you look at the set of Canasta, of extensions and skins within Canasta, I think there's an argument that that's more indicative of something than inclusion in other packages and wiki farms potentially. So how do you choose the best version down to the specific commit ID of an extension or skin? Again, to show how Canasta does it. Sorry, this font is getting a little small, but the Canasta approach is, if the extension is bundled in with MediaWiki, then it's simple. Just go with that exact code, because presumably that's well tested, and if there were a problem, it would have been fixed. For the other Wikimedia Foundation maintained extensions, just go with the branch for the current MediaWiki version, like 139, and the latest commit in that branch, and that seems to work quite well. For other extensions that have version releases, go with the latest released version, and then finally, for all other extensions, just go with the latest commit. That's the basic methodology. Okay, so that's great, but what if that version contains bugs? So a word about bugs. This is not a surprise to anyone who's ever done development, but every piece of software contains bugs if it's, does something beyond, just typing hello world, or, some other small thing. And it gets worse, because if you're talking about MediaWiki extension or skin, they don't even necessarily have to be in the code itself. They can appear when it's interacting with MediaWiki, or all the so-called LAMP stack, Linux and the rest, with Docker in the case of Canasta, with the libraries that it includes, and with other extensions and skins. So it's not even, it can be perfectly written and still not work. Well, it wouldn't really be perfectly written in that case, but so what do we do about bugs? Well, they can range in severity from, it adds some warning signs, messages that no one will ever see, to, delete the entire database. And that's not even obviously the full end of the spectrum for how much damage a bug can cause. So yeah, I mean, it becomes a choice of what do you do. Major bugs have to be dealt with. And in the ideal case, if you're running a wiki farm or package, or just a random wiki, if you encounter a bug, it's already been fixed in the extension. You just need to upgrade to that later code. But what do you do if that's not the case? If the bug is still there and it's severe? Well, so you have three main options. You can try to get the bug fixed somehow, report it to the developer, or try to fix it yourself and send the patch. You can just apply a local patch, or you can get rid of that extension. This isn't terribly, mind-blowing stuff. So this happened for us with Canasta. Let me. I'm sure Pavel Ashtikov will be surprised that I'm name checking him twice in one talk. But they were running a Canasta-based Docker image. He discovered a bug in the Maps extension. It wasn't working with Visual Editor. It was submitted to the Maps extension and committed by Yaron right afterwards.
Just clarify. This is submitting a patch to the Maps extension?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Submitted a bug. Yeah, there's a missing word there. Submitted patch. Okay. Submitted fix. Okay. So there it is. You can see that he committed it there at the top, and all was well. And then the version of Maps was then updated in Canasta. So that's a straightforward recounting of how this bug fix was handled. And here's the fix in the Canasta code to change the commit ID, the exact version being used. There are, I mentioned that you can apply local patches. There are currently 5 patches in Canasta that are all related to composer-based auto-loading of semantic MediaWiki related extensions. There's the listing of the 5. And here's a little screenshot of one of them, just a small change to composer.json. Why haven't they been added? It's they're all still waiting. And here's not to not to cast doubt on the semantic compound queries developers, but this is still an open patch, just waiting for someone to merge in or at least review. So what about non-major bugs? I think there's a strong case for not trying to fix those in a standard release. As I think a lot of developers would agree, every bug fix is an opportunity for additional bugs. The fix itself can introduce new bugs, and of course, if a bug was added at some date and the bug fix was added 2 months later, then if you just go right to the bug fix, then you also have to worry about all the other code that was merged in, that was checked in those intervening 2 months. So yeah, I mean, consistency is an important feature. Generally, the fewer code changes are made, the more confidence users can have that it works as intended. It's nice to be able to run a version of the code that thousands of other people have been using. There's much more guarantee that it'll work and won't break than if you switch to a newer version, even if you know that it fixes one specific bug. Yeah, any change to the code will remove some of that confidence. So that's my thought about bugs. Let's move on. Okay, yeah, many bugs should simply wait for the next major version, next major release to be fixed, and that's how we do it in Canasta. There's a sort of major set of changes and updates to all the extensions and skins with each change from one LTS long-term support version of MediaWiki to the next. So right now things are stable at 139, and then it'll move presumably once MediaWiki 143 is released. So yeah, so that's it as far as bugs. Here is what the how Canasta defines the set of extensions and repositories and commits to use. It just uses this YAML file with a certain syntax, and there's a lot that's basically a lot of default behavior there. So for instance, at the top there's media uploader. It doesn't specify the branch or the URL. It knows if no URL or branch is specified, it just goes to the Wikimedia Git repository and uses the rel 139 branch, so on. So there's a lot of omitted information here. And Canasta isn't the only one. There's a package called Mezzo, which I didn't mention before, although that was covered a little bit earlier, and I think will be covered more tomorrow. It too has a YAML file. It's a little bit of a different syntax. but it's the same kind of idea. And I think this seems like a really good approach to any sort of general solution for coming up with a best practices or recommended set of extensions and skins for any specific MediaWiki version. And my only other thought about this whole thing is I talked at the beginning about the complete set of recommendations as far as beyond just the minimum one. So what would be the most useful parts of that? It's not like people are really going to ask for best extensions to use with MediaWiki 1.10 and PHP 3 or what have you. But there is a good chance that people will ask about non-long-term support MediaWiki versions, like the current one, whatever it is, 140, I think, or 141.
142.
Or 142. That's recent.
Right.
Okay. Well, okay, yeah.
2 weeks ago.
All right, yeah. And then non-MySQL database systems, Postgres and SQLite, those definitely have their users. And specific feature needs. So if you want to create a wiki that does content publishing, for instance, or and so on and so on, you want one that does a lot of mapping, then it would, I think, be useful to have some kind of resource that ties these extensions and skins in some cases to specific content, to specific feature types. And I think that's it. We have a few minutes for questions or thoughts. Yeah.
Has anyone ever done like a web-based, package manager interface for something like this? I feel like on WordPress, if you're using like the WordPress.com thing, you can go in and like install plugins from the web UI. I mean, maybe it would make sense for that to be handled by like a particular wiki farm, because maybe the server maintainer would have a list of packages that they're willing to install and deal with. But I just wonder, has anyone ever done that? Put it in the web interface itself?
I'm aware of a failed project that tried to do that around 2010 or something like that. But something like this might potentially be the missing link there, to have a public YAML file or whatever it is, so it sees your MediaWiki version and then it knows which extensions and skins to make available to the user. Potentially that was one of the missing ingredients before that prevent from really working out. Yeah.
I was under the impression that maybe Lex Sulzer worked on it. Doesn't like ManageWiki have some sort of thing that lets you do that? I'm not familiar with it, but
I think ManageWiki, the ManageWiki extension only lets you enable or disable extensions that are already installed or already downloaded, but I could be wrong.
But nothing like arbitrary?
I don't think.
Set up the commits if you want.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well,
I don't know if anything that goes out and gets code. I mean, there's obviously security issues with that also, but
secure. I feel like that already counts then, right? And then MyWiki, we have our own custom self-service portal.
Does it let you download arbitrarily from
Obviously
GitHub or whatever?
As you said, it's insecure. We would never allow that.
Yeah, well,
We do. Yeah.
It does set up branches, so it'll pull commits from capital base commit on certain branch.
It's pretty good.
yeah, but having something like this also could potentially take care of security issues. If you know that the code is only going to be able to go out to these 100 URLs to get code, there's potentially less of a problem there. Yeah. Go ahead, Rich.
Well, I was just going to go back to something you said in your talk about the challenge of trying to find not just the right version to the commit level of an extension for a particular version of MediaWiki. And then you also talked about the complexities of making sure that any two extensions are compatible.
Sure.
But then there's a third problem, and that is that the exact configuration of each extension is also a variable in the compatibility matrix. And so
Yeah.
I like what you showed there with the YAML files, because they, not only do they specify the extension, where you're getting it from, what version you're getting it from, but in the Meza case, I don't know if this is the case for Canasta as well, it also allows you to capture the configuration as text, so you can manage your extension configurations as text.
Yeah, that's one thing where I think Meza does a better job than Canasta. Canasta doesn't have something like that, and yeah, it's certainly helpful, especially for extensions where you have. It's kind of weird that there's some extensions where you have to set some settings at the beginning, like it doesn't work by default. Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah.
This is just more of a comment that MediaWiki does have a sort of an undocumented departure function, shows how many people are actually using the extension, who have actually bothered to turn it on. So we can get a little more like, so variables right now is 632, so about 10% of the farm. Arrays is 339, so about 5% of area use. So it's not as bad as it looks compared to like, more common site phone.
That's
But
interesting.
There's more data available if people need it or want to look into it. I can help you.
Yeah, that is interesting. I didn't know any wiki farms published that information. Maybe there's a way to.
Well, it's not published.
Oh, okay.
But it is public, so I can tell you how to do it.
Cool. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.